Good evening, everybody. It's Freedom Friday night again, my favorite night of the week. And that has a lot to do with being here on these Friday nights. My journey is very much about my own personal freedom and freedom for those that would want the same to experience their own personal freedom, and very much about collective freedom, too. Not that everybody has to do the same thing, but I think as human beings, many of us have this basic, little flame of freedom. We know that deep down at the core, we're not really limited. A lot of that is our own programming. So this show is about individual freedom, collective freedom, however that looks for you. But that's the basis of it. So that's why I call it Freedom Friday Nights. So welcome, everybody, to another one. I am very, very psyched about tonight's show. And you are tuned into the Humanity Transcending show, and I'm your host, Siobhan Ceresi, on Toxic Reality Radio. And I do this every Friday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Times. You can tune in. Sometimes I do solo shows, and most of the time I have guests on, and tonight's guest is awesome, in my opinion. I only became aware of his work and him a few years ago, so I'm very much looking forward to him because his background is quite extensive. So my guest tonight is Alfred Lambremont Webre, and I hope I said that right. He'll let me know if I didn't. And on his bio it says JD, and I didn't know what that was, so I looked it up, and that means Juris Doctor. And if my understanding is correct, that is a scientific study of law. He has a background in law, in the study of certain types of law. And that's something that I am myself studying, contract law. I read a little bit about constitutional law. I think it's important to explore those things because we do live in a system, in a law system, whether we want to acknowledge that or know that or not. A lot of people will say, well, I'm not interested in politics, but the reality of it is that politics is a part of our lives. Period. It's just the way it is on this planet, and there are what we call those universal laws that kind of play out in our lives too. Like where what you put out is what you get back, and I see this regularly in my life. I have the eyes to recognize it, not always, but I have the eyes to recognize it a lot in my life, that who I'm being, where I'm coming from, what I'm putting out into the world, what I'm putting out into my relationships is what I'm going to get back. And I see this all the time. So there are these universal laws, just fundamental ways of life and creation and nature that exist. And as above, so below, there is law here on this planet, too, that mankind has created. And so it's important to explore that because we are a part of that. So hopefully Alfred can expand on that more for us. But he is also an MED. He is a futurist and author of Exopolitics, Politics, Government, and Law in the Universe, a book that founded the field of exopolitics, which is considered the science of relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse. Alfred's investigative journalism has been featured on True TV, Press TV, and mainstream TV networks, and has exposed an international war crimes racketeering organization, probably what some of us might call the New World Order or the elite, right? Few names for it, but nonetheless, he has been investigating this and exposing these crimes that are taking place against the whole of humanity, really, and the planet in a way. But he's exposed an international war crimes racketeering organization using exotic technologies, such as a HARP aerosol/chemtrails weapons system for tectonic and weather warfare, mind control, and other ecocidal and depopulation programs. He is a chairman of the Mars Anomaly Research Society. You can find that at projectmars.net. And by the way, you can visit exopolitics.org if you want to pull that up, if you're near your computer and you want to kind of scope that out, exopolitics.org. All right, so he's the chairman of the Mars Anomaly Research Society. leading an international effort to research, disclose, and educate the public about life on Mars. He has proposed a truth amnesty process to facilitate the release of the advanced extraterrestrial-derived new energy technologies that can be used to create a sustainable, peaceful space-age society. Alfred is a graduate of Yale University and Yale Law School in International Law and was a Fulbright Scholar in International Economic Integration in Uruguay. He has taught economics at Yale University and constitutional law at the University of Texas. Alfred was general counsel to the New York City Environmental Protection Administration, a futurist at Stanford Research Institute, where, and again, his background is so interesting. It just, every time I keep reading, it's just more and more interesting. So at Stanford Research Institute, and where he directed the proposed 1977 Carter White House extraterrestrial communications study. Maybe we can get into that a little bit. He was an NGO, I believe that's non-governmental organizations, delegate to the United Nations and the Unispace Conference, and is a judge on the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, which this tribunal is, if I'm correct, again, he'll let me know and expand on it, but this tribunal has brought, I think already, indictment charges against some of these criminals who perpetrated 9/11, and I believe that includes Bush and some other of the administration at the time. So I'm really interested in that as well. And he is currently developing EXO University, which is I know it's a nonprofit university designed to, well, basically, I think it encompasses most of what Alfred does and what he's accumulated, the knowledge in his life, to share that with others who are interested in that. So before I bring Alfred on, I just want to put this out there, as I usually do. I'm big on using and operating from our vast intelligence. And we've been taught that most of our intelligence exists up in our head, which is only partially true. And we know scientifically that the heart is an intelligence all in its own right. And in terms of its energy field and electrical activity, it's bigger, more expansive, more powerful than the mind's electrical activity and energy field. So we have a very sophisticated, beautiful, powerful set of intelligences in our body, in our emotional body, in our thought body. And so I always like to encourage you guys, and I do it myself, is to listen and learn from our heart and mind combined. I think when we just listen from our head, that's when we get tripped up and we can't even really hear or decipher the deeper meaning of what we're hearing because we're too caught up in our head about the logistics of it, about the rationale of it or the irrationale of it. And you're going to hear information tonight that is going, especially if you don't know too much about these type of topics or if you're just learning about them. Some people this is not going to be so new to. Some people it will be. And those are the people I encourage the most to just have that open mind and open heart. The people that already have looked into this stuff, they already have that. The people who are just coming into this knowledge, you need it. You need to listen from your heart openly to be able to process this information because it's very deep. It's going to challenge everything we think we know. It's going to uproot some of our most base programming and paradigms, and that's a beautiful thing because once we're in that space of, things aren't as they seemed or things aren't as I thought they were, well, you just open up to a whole new perception and reality of what life means and what it is and your role in it. So, again, I encourage that. And without further ado, I welcome Alfred. Welcome. Are you here with us, Alfred?
Yes. Hello?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. That's great.
It's such a pleasure to meet you. I've seen your face, and I've seen you on videos and seen some of your lectures at conferences. And
oh, good enough.
I'm just delighted to be able to speak to you this way. So welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Awesome.
So, Yeah, you seem to have a fairly well-defined idea of the various topics that you'd like to cover tonight, and I have some idea of how they might fit together. So, what if I just follow your lead and you kind of, just kind of lead me to where you'd like to explore?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Well, first of all, in all honesty, reading through your bio, looking at your work, it is so vast and expansive, and it's almost, I was like, well, where do I even start? Because there's so many interesting things that I'd like, to go over with you. So I picked up a few basics, and then, I figured you would be able to fill in between those basics, right? Because this is your life, this is your work. And so I guess first and foremost, I would like for myself to have a better understanding and the listeners on what exopolitics means to you, right? If I looked up those two words in the dictionary, exo is outer or outside, and politics is the art or science of government, political actions, practices, or policies. So exopolitics is like the outer, like outside of the current political actions, practices, and policies of government, right?
Yeah.
So can you expand on what exopolitics is, what it means to you, and what it purposes?
It's a very good question, and because these are all sort of infant sciences. We're in a great period of transition where we're moving away from a Gaia-centered or an Earth-centered society and paradigm and kind of self-image to more of a galactic-centered or universe-centered or multiverse-centered, where at an individual level and then at a societal level, we're moving toward recognizing that we live in a highly populated and highly organized multiverse, and within traditional history, that we've gone through similar watersheds. Going from Earth is flat to Earth is round in Western society, say. Right. And of course, these are all sort of artificial periods because humanity has gone through many, many different cultural shifts over long periods of time. And our current history is highly artificial and highly constructed.
Right. Well, you mentioned something, and you mentioned that, so we're moving from sort of an Earth, almost self-centered, like just really operating like it's just us, into a more, into an understanding, into an integration that it's not just us, that there's other intelligent life out there, equally intelligent or even superior or maybe less intelligent, but a variety. Now, I have seen enough videos and watched enough ex-NASA, ex-CIA, ex-military, ex-government officials talk about their experiences with extraterrestrials, seeing UFOs and things like this, having them caught on radar. My logic, I haven't had any extraterrestrial experiences, like in my waking conscious state. I've had dreams about it, but how, for those that don't know much about this, how do we know that the universe is highly populated? Like what, just briefly in a nutshell, the past few years or even over the past few decades, because I know the UFO files go back decades. So how do we know, for the average individual, right, how do we know that the universe is highly populated with intelligent life equal to us, less or higher?
Well, this goes back to your original question, which I think I should answer first, and then get to how do we know that the universe is populated. Your original question is, what is exopolitics?
Right.
And the answer to that is that exopolitics is a social science, like any other social science like anthropology. And the definition of exopolitics is that it's a science of relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse. Let me repeat that. It's the science of relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse. And each of those words has meaning to it. Now, so then you can go into each word and parse it and say, well, how do you know this and how do you know that? And exopolitics is really a branch both of science and philosophy. It's a branch of cosmology and ontology in philosophy. And in ontology, which answers questions as to categories, we know that from a philosophical question, it's very difficult to prove that you exist or that I exist. I think, therefore I am. So that once one goes to issues of proof, we're moving beyond the levels of ontological proof into what I call the levels of the law of evidence. Now, how do I come to law of evidence? The background that I'm using here for people, and I'm trying not to be too esoteric.
Which I'm fine with, by the way, because that's almost where I want to go, but I know I have an audience of both. I really do. It's kind of vast. I have people who know, who've been looking into this type of information. I have people who are just coming into it.
Right. So people always say, well, what's your proof? But then, you see, you have to back up and say, well, what do you mean by proof? Mm-hmm. You say, at the level of ontology, you can't even prove that you exist. So why are we even having a conversation? Like, that's a nonsensical question, okay? So then I say, in order not to spend 2 hours around a nonsensical question, around a science that is nonsensical, therefore, let me show you how we make this a sensical question. And the way we make it a sensical question is that we define exopolitics like any other science, like anthropology, as a science of relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse, and the protocols that we use in exopolitics are the protocols of the law of evidence, the same protocols that we use in anthropology. How do we know that there's so many species of there's so many substrates of human crania on the planet? Well, because anthropologists go out and they discover all these crania,
Right, and they observe them, and they
They watch
them.
Well, it's the same thing. Same thing. We use the law of evidence, and I'm not hawking wares here, but we're at the beginning of a new science, and it was my book, Exopolitics, first published in 2001, that actually brought the new field of exopolitics into being, actually landed the new discipline on the planet, and there's a whole context to that. There's an enormous context, which we can define further on in the program. But I kind of want to follow this thread with you, because the thread of proof and evidence is very important, and I just want to illustrate to people that if they want to hang themselves up on proof, well, they can't even prove that they exist, ontologically speaking.
I get that. Right. To have just that be your basis for wanting to even hear about this or go forward after this, it's very it's just one small puzzle here.
They might as well enroll in university courses in ontology and spend all of their time there. Boom. Now, So we're dealing with the law of evidence. Now, in my book, Exopolitics, which is like a primer, it's like a primer, it's like a beginner's introduction to exopolitics. You can find the book on Amazon. You can find the book at exopolitics.com. You can go to your local library and ask them to order Exopolitics, Politics, Government, and Law in the Universe by Alfred Lambremont Webre. And they will order it through Baker and Taylor, and it'll come, and you'll have it in your library. You don't have to spend any money for it, okay? And in there, you'll see the 15 or 16 sources of evidence that go into the data, into the scientific data around which we develop exopolitics, or the science of relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse. Because the question is, how do you know we're on a planet? How do you know we're in a galaxy? How do you know we're in a universe? How do you know we're in a multiverse? How do you know there are other intelligent civilizations in the multiverse? Right. Each of those are questions to which you bring an array of evidence, okay? Now, there are at least 15 different categories of empirical evidence to bring to the issue of intelligent civilizations in the multiverse, okay? And so it is a worthy career, I believe. And so what we've done is to found a new institution of higher learning in the area called Exo University. And because we're in the business, we have to found our own institutions in this new paradigm. And there are very practical reasons for that. What occurred is that in 1953, following a very historic flyover of the U.S. Capitol by interdimensional UFOs, that is, UFO spacecraft that created their own interdimensional wormholes, came into this dimension and overflew the U.S. Capitol, were photographed so doing, and were on the front pages of newspapers throughout the world. In 1953, the CIA, fearing world panic, according to them, convened a thing called the Robertson Panel, and which issued a thing called the Durant Report. And the Durant Report stated that henceforth, in order to avoid world panic, there would be no discussion of UFOs, intelligent civilizations, or extraterrestrials in academia, science,
what report was this
government.
Did you say this was a report that...
Durant Report of the Robertson Panel, of the CIA Robertson Panel of 1953, DURANT. And so, effectively, since 1953, the CIA has prohibited any public discourse about extraterrestrial life, about intelligent civilizations in the multiverse, either in the public media, in government, in academia, in education, under penalty of any, journalist, any scientist, any government official, or any academic who began to discuss these matters would either lose their job, be ruined, or in some cases eliminated, assassinated.
Right.
And so we've been under what's called an information embargo. And so that's why we have an artificial history that seems to have begun 5,000 years ago.
Why so adamant? Why are these government agencies, well, you mentioned the CIA, why so adamant about masking these truths?
Yeah. Well, you have asked, now you're beginning to think like an exopolitician, right?
I guess so. If you're telling me,
You've gone from prove that they exist to, well, why are they covering it up, right?
Right.
And now we can get into the interesting questions. Now, that is a key question, and there's more than one answer. There's more than one answer.
Sure. There's got to be several, right?
And so let's go back to 1953 and think of our dimension and this planet as being potentially a planet of interest of different groups of interdimensional or extraterrestrial civilizations. In the same way that if you look at our planet now, in terms of geopolitics, there are many different interest groups. If you look at even this solar system or this galaxy or this group of contiguous dimensions around our dimension of time-space, there's a whole mix of stakeholders, of stakeholder civilizations, and a whole mix of motivations ranging from predatory civilizations to sort of observing civilizations to civilizations that are involved in developing us, kind of our gardeners, sort of have even developed Homo sapiens as a project over long periods of time.
You're talking about like genetically engineering or tinkering with? No?
Yeah, so we are at the bottom of the food chain. Did you say yes or did you say no there? Yeah, I said yes.
Oh, you said yes, okay.
Yeah, yes to everything you said, but in different senses. You see, you're asking questions that have multidimensional answers.
Right.
Because there isn't just one type of extraterrestrial, and there isn't just one intention, and the extraterrestrials don't all come from one place, and we can't get there from here because we're in a different dimension, and not all of the extraterrestrials are in the same dimension, i.e., we can't address the issue of exopolitics with the same type of third-dimensional time-space thinking that we have here. We have to we have to put ourselves in or picture what, begin to imagine what the multiverse or what reality might look like from their point of view. And this is what happened to me a few years ago when Oxford University Press, which is a division of Oxford University, approached me and asked me to write a book on extraterrestrial civilizations and the law. So I said, isn't that interesting? Because first of all, I looked around and I said, there's no, the first issue when you go to write any book about in this area is a typology, and there is no existing adequate typology of extraterrestrial civilizations. If you go into anthropology, there's all sorts of typologies. But if you go into exopolitics, there are no adequate typologies. Two of the typologies that exist One is by scientist Dr. Michio Kaku, who some of your listeners may have heard of, where he says, oh, well, what there is that there's a scale of civilizations, and the way that civilizations are distinguished in the multiverse is by the types of energy that they use. There's a type 0 civilization, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. And the difference between a type 0 and a type 1, we unearth a type 0 because we're consuming our planetary nest for energy.
And we're not replenishing anything. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we're considered 0 right now. We're on the bottom.
Yeah, and so the big issue is whether type 0 civilizations make it from 0 to 1 without self-destructing. And that's kind of where we're at. Our big question is, will we make it from 0 to 1? One is kind of a self-sustaining civilization that knows that it lives in a populated, organized multiverse, and that is using the resources of its solar system and of interstitial space as an energy source. And so that's the big question on everybody's mind. Are we going to be able to
I just had
become
I just have to
a
ask you
type
a
1
question.
civilization without
Alfred, I just want to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
When you said that, a light bulb kind of went off a little bit for me.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of space-based weapons, is this one of the reasons that there are moves to weaponize space because there will be potential resource if we make it that far, right? If we don't self-destruct before that, are these governments of the planet looking to weaponize space to usurp the resources for themselves, United States included? Is that part of the agenda, would you say? That's a whole other topic.
Well, you see, there's so many assumptions in what you state in your question.
Right.
Like, space has been weaponized forever.
Okay.
In
terms of us weaponizing our solar system.
No, we have weaponized space forever, for a long time. And that's what HARP is. HARP is primarily a space-based weapon of mass destruction. HARP is our weapon against the galactic fleet that wants to liberate planet Earth from an international war crimes racketeering organization that has hijacked the planet. Let me repeat that.
Yes, can you start from HARP? HARP is...
Yeah. HARP is a space-based weapon of mass destruction, one of whose functions is, as a defensive weapon against a galactic fleet that wants to liberate humanity from the grip of an international war crimes racketeering organization that has hijacked this planet for its own power.
So this is not necessarily a benevolent beings looking to help liberate humanity for humanity's benefit. You're saying that
what? I'm sorry?
Maybe I'm hearing this wrong, because you're saying it's a defense against this particular galactic fleet or civilization who's looking to help liberate humanity. So you're saying there's certain powers that don't want that liberation to happen, and they're using that to fend them off, or am I hearing this right? Okay.
Of course. That's why we're on a planet of wars, disease, crime, and poverty. Because that is the war, that we're on a planet whose power matrix only knows how to produce war, disease, crime, and poverty. That's their social product through permanent war. And that's the legacy of the Anunnaki extraterrestrial landings 280,000 years ago, and the imposition of a hierarchical, exploitative, legacy through the monarchies and the banking bloodlines. And so we're on a planet whose elite is highly corrupt, is ecocidal, and is genocidal. And the ethical upper dimensional extraterrestrials, such as the Pleiadians, the Alpha Centaurians, the Syrians, and others, who are part of a regional galactic governance authority that helped develop Homo sapiens in the first place, are trying to liberate us into a positive future and away from a catastrophic future as slaves of the permanent war economy. And one of the weapons that the current power matrix on Earth, that you call the New World Order, has developed is a space-based weapon of mass destruction called HARP, which fires electromagnetic beams at the spacecraft of the galactic fleet to keep them away from liberating the planet. Star Wars is kind of, the Star Wars movie series is sort of an allegory of the situation that we're in. And this planet is in the grips of, in the Star Wars series, what's called the Empire, kind of an evil force. And so that exopolitics is a science that provides a narrative that gives the individual and human society a realistic science-based appraisal of their true circumstance vis-a-vis other intelligent civilizations on this planet and in the near Earth environment.
Okay, I got
that. Now do you understand more?
I do, and my lingering question, which you had just, you had stated that, that's a logical sort of next question to ask is, why so adamant about preventing humanity from liberation, preventing humanity from expanding and liberating itself and getting assistance from other beings that would like to assist? Why so hell-bent on having it not happen between...
Yeah, okay.
Right?
You used a very important four-letter word. What do you think that four-letter word was?
I don't know. You have to tell me. I just kind of blurted it out.
It starts with an H.
Hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Expand on that if you would, please.
Well, we are incarnated souls who want to make this a paradise planet or heaven on Earth. We're in an interdimensional arena here on Earth. Well, there are also incarnated souls who want to make this a hell on Earth. In other words, who want Earth to follow a catastrophic timeline.
That would make sense since we're in a duality, right? You have both. You have both intentions at the, interplaying at the same time.
Yeah. And so then in terms of the dimensional ecology, what you have is a dimensional ecology where predatory extraterrestrials, such as the Draco reptilians and the Orion Gray extraterrestrials, who archetypally kind of present as demons, right? And that relates to hell. Their rollout of the New World Order is sort of hell on Earth. That's what they want for the planet, because they harvest human souls and they harvest human fear, because they live in a fourth dimension and that's what they live on. And their goal is to take over of this this quadrant of the galaxy. So there's a real competition for turf going on here as to who controls planet Earth. The heavens or the hells, the light-oriented souls or the dark-oriented souls, the humans or the reptilians and greys. And that's what exopolitics is about. And what exopolitics provides is a science and a language that allows the human to have a realistic appraisal of the reality that they're in. It takes one out of the superstitions of religions into the reality of science.
Okay. That is fascinating. And I mean, I'm grateful it exists, that I'm just, when did you become, if this is okay, and if you don't want to share, that's fine too, but on a personal level, when did you become aware of when I say extraterrestrial, I mean, just the fact that we are engaged in extraterrestrial relationship, that, the governments of the world know that, not all of the people in government per se, but I mean, when did you become aware of this? I mean,
but this is
decades
really
ago,
a lifelong,
because you've been working on this for such a long time.
Yeah, it's like, our lives are lifelong learning projects. So there isn't like boing, a magic day when that happened. But I can point to definitive steps along the way. For me, and each and every person has their own individual journey. And my journey, which in addressing this, I have to back up a bit.
Okay.
What DARPA's Project Pegasus, which was a secret early 1970s quantum access program, which accessed a time-space hologram by the Defense Advanced Project Agency. What they proved is that we, meaning humanity in this universe, live inside what we can call a time-space hologram. That is, we live in kind of a virtual reality, which is composed of timelines. And time is a dimension. It's a fourth dimension, along with space, of height, width, and depth. And so right now, you and I are sharing timelines along with the rest of humanity. We're sharing a common experience of a timeline inside a virtual experience called the time-space hologram that by convention we call planet Earth. Okay. Now, what I've discovered is that the book that I wrote in 1999 called Exopolitics, that was published in the year 2000 and then published as a hardcover book, as a regular book in the year 2005, was actually time traveled from some point 2005 forward by the CIA and DARPA back to at least 1971, where it was witnessed by at least 3 independent witnesses
Your book was witnessed by witnesses prior to it being written?
It was witnessed in 1971 because it was time traveled by the CIA and DARPA using Tesla-based quantum access time travel technology back to 1971. So I'm the first author in history who has been informed that his book was traveled in time. And in 1971, and you're going to see, I'm answering your question, but I'm answering it in all of its dimensions.
Okay.
Because we live in a multidimensional reality. Back in 1971, I was General Counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration of New York City. And at that time, one of my jobs was to give public speeches on the environment. So I used to accept invitations and go out and give speeches. And one of the invitations I got was for a group. They drove me down, almost down to Washington, D.C., and I ended up speaking to a group of men in this nondescript office building, about 50 men in suits and, shirts and ties, and they did not look like environmentalists, normal environmental groups that I would address, which are mainly students and housewives. They looked like spooks. And so I was standing in front of them with double vision, and I knew that this is not what it seemed, i.e., I'm in a group, and supposedly I'm here as General Counsel for the Environmental Protection Administration, but I know through what I call cognitive dissonance that there's some other process going on here. A number of the people in the group were sneering at me while I spoke, right? So I have double vision. I'm a Gemini, so I just gave my standard stump speech. Well, what I found out later was that they were 50 members of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Advanced Projects Research Agency of the U.S. Department of Defense, who had copies of my book, Exopolitics, which I would not write until nearly 40 years later in 1999, and which would be published in 2005, which have been brought back in time through Tesla-based time travel.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I had the privilege of my thoughts informing, in a positive way, the U.S. government. Now, they might have thought, oh, well, we're just suppressing this guy, or they were probably wanting to see, let's see how this guy performs.
Right, I was going to say, well, what did they say to you when they visited? Were they trying to shake you down or intimidate you in some way? What was their...
They were just watching me give my standard environmental stump speech, and they were performing what I call time travel surveillance. Time travel surveillance. That is, the Central Intelligence Agency, as DARPA, has now covertly been using quantum access time travel technology for over 40 years, unethically and illegally for political surveillance purposes.
Amazing. So,
yeah.
Are they then able to,
if
they can see into the future, or if they can see into the future with these technologies, then I guess they could go ahead and prevent certain things, or use the timeline in some way, right?
From the best point of view, they can prevent the catastrophic timeline, right? Or they can, from the worst point of view, they can cause a catastrophic timeline. Now, what do we know? This is kind of veering off, but I urge your listeners, if you want to know more, you can go to our website, exopolitics.com, And on the right-hand menu, there are all these topics, and click on time travel and teleportation, and it'll take you into this whole world. And you can start there with a classic article of mine that was published in the Australian magazine Veritas called Time Travel and Political Control. And I think it's apropos because we're in presidential debate season right now. And in that article, I reveal, based on the revelations of my colleague whistleblower, Andrew DiBisciago, whose revelations have been confirmed in many areas as to the U.S. possession of quantum access, teleportation, and time travel by at least 4 independent whistleblowers, including Michael Relf, Bernard Mendez, William Brett Stillings, and others, that the U.S. since 1971 has pre-identified all future U.S. presidents, has called them, has pre-informed them back in 1971, and has briefed them and groomed them for 30 years, so that by the time a Barack Obama or George W. Bush gets to the presidency, they are not a genuine politician. They are, in fact, a covert CIA political operative, and they have been groomed to be president for, in the case of Obama and Bush, 20 and 30 years, because they were so informed in 1971. So what the great American public and the world public don't know, but what the cadre in the truth movement and the exopolitics movement are making known, including through this interview, is that the U.S. presidency and many other organs of political control have been captured by quantum access time travel. And that is a mechanism for maintaining control over this planet vis-a-vis other extraterrestrial races, some of which, like the Draco reptilians and the Orion Greys, may have wished to have a controlling agenda, and in fact, may have taken over the U.S. government and certain institutions. From a certain point of view, what is known on Earthian terms as, quote, the New World Order is in fact the 4th dimensional Draco reptilian and Orion Grey rollout in the 3rd dimension. That's basically what it is. And so what exopolitics does is it goes back to fundamentals. It says, okay, what sciences, we're in a time-space hologram. We're in a virtual reality. What is running this reality? It appears that there are technologies in the form of Tesla-based and there are up to 8 or so time travel technologies that are being used by the CIA, by other controllers who are the muscle of the international power matrix, and that's how they control all these acts on Earth. The debates, all of that is all a charade. The outcome of the election has been known since 1971, and the winners have been pre-informed.
This is wild because, my research and knowledge had got me to the place where I know that the presidents are groomed and that it's theater, it's great theater, it's all staged and pre-planned, but I had no idea that it would link into the time travel aspect and
Yeah. And I urge you and I urge your listeners to really follow up on this and go to exopolitics.com, click on time travel and teleportation, and get into the interviews and into the articles and analysis so that you know the science that's behind this. This is part of the science of exopolitics, and that's why I call it the survival science for humanity and planet Earth, because this is how we are deconstructing the matrix and liberating ourselves from this force that is using advanced technology to hem us in what effectively is dimensional warfare.
Why do you think we've been so asleep to this? Because I also hold in my consciousness, a unity consciousness, like I know we're connected to everything. So, I mean, what is our role in this? Have we been that asleep that we would just, sleepwalk into our own self-destruction? I mean, we must take responsibility in some way for what's happening, right?
Yeah. Well, again, you're asking key questions, and there are multidimensional answers to these questions. But just, it's not entirely humanity's fault because, number one, at the dimensional level, the attempted takeover of planet Earth and Mars and its moons, which a 1964 U.S. intelligence report said that the Draco reptilians and the Orion Greys were timelining for some time between the year 2000 and 2050. That has been going on covertly for quite some time. And part of the methodology there is to bring all of the Earthian elites and the Earthian government institutions under gray mind control. So nobody on the planet understands what's really going on. And that's why you have all of these Earthian power structures become Satanists, because they feel that by allying with these interdimensional forces that are allied with agendas that have been in deep exopolitical rebellion against the galactic governance forces over millennia. These are things that are archetypally and symbolically written of in the book of Genesis. For example, the story of Adam and Eve and the expulsion from the garden is all an allegory about ancient exopolitical wars. So that's why the power structures and those that are, trying to maintain their foothold ally themselves with these darker forces, because they want to maintain that power. But now, because we're coming into a period of unity consciousness, the difference between unity consciousness and duality consciousness is very simple. Duality consciousness is a zero-sum game. It's I win, you lose. And unity consciousness is based on we are one, fundamental realization. And there's been kind of a changeover in the fundamental program that is running this virtual reality.
Right, it's a huge changeover. It's it's completely different, than the separation paradigm. The oneness unity. Completely different.
Yeah, it is. I just like to mention this. For some reason, there's a large static on my phone, and it's really hard for me to hear and to kind of follow this. And I'm wondering if technically it can be fixed. Should I call in again or what?
You know what? I would like to say for you to be able to, but I'm actually having problems on my end. My internet went down probably about just a few minutes into our phone call. I don't have internet, right? This particular show is done by phone, and I did have internet when we first started. I don't know why my connection's lost. I did check around the modem a little bit, and I can't even take calls or anything like that.
Wow.
So I'm almost hesitant to end the call because on the back end online, I already have it up from before I lost connection.
It's just that it's. I just want to say this, and that I'm very, very happy to come back on another occasion, but this is very difficult for me to understand, and I've done this for about 1 hour now, and I don't know if I can sustain it for a second hour with this level of interference. And I wondered whether it would be okay for us to leave for me to leave the program here and to take it up and complete the second hour at some future date, because it's very difficult to follow you with this level of interference.
Yeah, I'll speak clearly and slowly. That would be fine. We can do that. And I'm actually, I'm not liking that I don't have internet connection, which is rare. There should be no reason for that to be happening.
Yeah.
So, let's do
I
that.
would like to express that I deeply appreciate your level of understanding and the level of platform that you provide for the complete expression of this, because you really pursue thoughts at a very rigorous level, and I think that's good, because then it allows mutually for us to engage in a process of mutual expression and discovery. So I look forward to coming back on your show, and hopefully we won't have these technical issues.
Thank you so much for saying that. I'm delighted to be able to speak to you, and I really look forward to speaking more to you, and we'll figure it out. You know, maybe we could even do a pre-record. However it has to happen, we'll make it happen.
Great.
So thank you so much for joining me for the past hour. And,
good enough.
Yes, and you have a wonderful evening, and we'll be back together real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.